Greetings internet, it's Monica, and today I am here to do a video that I've been wanting to film for such a long time. As you guys know, I am a massive fan of the Grisha-verse from Leigh Bardugo. I love the original trilogy and I love the duology and I love King of Scars. Just Leigh Bardugo can do no wrong in my book. I initially completed the Grisha trilogy 5 years ago, and it's been a while, and recently I reread that initial trilogy and I thought it would be interesting to look back on my series review that I posted here on my channel and just sort of react to it and see how my thoughts have changed, because I know for a fact, or at least my memory of the series definitely changed when I was rereading it. I had a lot of ideas of how I thought I felt about the series, and then when I reread it I was like, oh wait, I feel totally different. So I'm very interested to go back and watch what my actual review was and what my actual thoughts were on my channel and just see, you know, what's the same, what's different, and talk about that with you guys. So I'm really intrigued to see just what past me thought about the series, because I know I loved it back then, but I also know that I felt very differently about certain characters. Hey everyone, it's Monica, and today I'm going to be doing a review of the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo. First of all, my editing, my whole coloring, definitely we have improved since this time period, hopefully, and also this was a dark time for my eyebrows. I don't currently have the first one because I have shipped it already over to the East Coast, but I have the last two. Right, this was this weird limbo time between when I moved from San Francisco to New York City. This was a horrible time in my life. You don't know this if you were following me back then. Basically at this point in time I was living in the basement of this super sketchy Airbnb, because San Francisco rent is astronomical and ridiculous. So I basically had one super tiny bedroom in this sketchy Airbnb in San Francisco where lots of other people were living, and the shower, the bathroom that I used was a communal bathroom, but it was super tiny and unfinished, and it was just really depressing. my entire existence at this point, I never saw the sun. I'm separating this video into two parts. The first part will be a non-spoiler overview review of the series, and then the second part will be a full discussion of all of my feels. So if you've read the series already, you can keep watching all the way until the end, and if not, then I'll tell you when to stop watching. The Shadow and Bone, it takes place in Ravka, which is a country loosely based off of Russia. In this logic, so in order to summon air, you have to have air or water or something to pull from. It's also what I love about Brandon. I do really like that. That's one of the elements that I really love about the series, is that it's based in logic. You have to have something in order to create something. You can't just all of a sudden, create sunlight or create, wind or whatever. You have to have something to pull from. I like that about the series. I feel like that's sometimes a little rare. That she has her own latent Grisha power. From that point, she is whisked away to the palace and to the Darkling, who is the... Alright, we don't have to go through the whole summary. Also, I definitely watch my own videos at 2x speed. I don't know about you guys. I really loved the series. I thought it was so much fun. The world is truly such a gem, which is why I'm so excited that her next series takes place in the same world, because I just adored this universe. I thought the magic system, like I said before, loved that it had a logic behind it. The characters are all super complex, and they all have these really fantastic story arcs. Some of my favorite characters are probably the Darkling and Nikolai. Forever a Nikolai stan. Once a Nikolai stan, always a Nikolai stan. We love one blonde prince. The Darkling, Nikolai you don't meet until later on in the series, but the Darkling, I just thought he was in a lot of ways a response to characters like Edward Cullen in Twilight, and I just thought he was so fun to read. And I still totally agree with this, and I think that it's one of my favorite parts about the series is that, I think it came out during a time period when there was a lot of these sort of older men who just looked really young and were the romantic interests for these teen girls. And I love the Darkling because I think that in a lot of ways he is an allegory to that, or it's Leigh Bardugo criticizing that whole trope, and I think that it's freaking brilliant the way that she does it. And really quite heartbreaking. I gave Shadow and Bone 5 stars out of 5. I gave Siege and Storm 5 stars out of 5. And I gave Ruin and Rising 4 stars out of 5, only because I didn't love the ending, but I totally still think you should finish the series and read this one because it is still an amazing read. So now I'm going to get into the part where I talk about some spoilers. Alright, so if you don't know, I recently reread the entire trilogy and I gave every single one 5 stars out of 5, especially the last one. I'm very interested to see what I say. So just a warning, I'm about to go into the spoilery section of this video, so if you haven't read the initial Grisha trilogy, you should probably head out now. I won't be spoiling like Six of Crows or anything like, or King of Scars, because obviously at this point in time I had not read them yet. They weren't out yet, which is wild. What I will say is, again, sort of following up on what I just said about like the Darkling, I think that that was also very prevalent in King of Scars, and I feel like in a lot of ways there's an element about the worshippers within King of Scars. I'm trying to like say this in the least spoilery way possible. The worshippers in King of Scars, I feel like, is kind of Leigh Bardugo poking fun at like Darkling stands, and like I love the Darkling, don't get me wrong. But I kind of feel like that's part of it, and it's also part of why I kind of love that book too, and why I think it's so smart. I just adore her and that entire universe. So yeah, gonna jump into spoilery stuff now. The Darkling, especially in that first book, as this really brilliant critique of characters like Edward Cullen and other characters like him that you see in a lot of fiction, not just YA, where it's this older, typically immortal, or at least very, very old character who falls in love with a teenager. And it's weird. And I feel like people don't talk about how weird it is very often, but it is. It's really weird. And there, you know, I can't help but always think like there's something darker going on here. And what I love in this book is that there is something darker going on there, and that he's not just like head over heels in love with this random teenager that he just met. Like, no, he's using her, and he is able to very easily manipulate her because he's like a bajillion years old. I'm actually very impressed with younger me in like picking up on that and discussing that, because that's definitely something that I felt a lot of when I was rereading the trilogy this time around. I also loved that his character isn't so incredibly black and white, that he isn't just evil and that's it, that all of these actions come from a place of him wanting to do good, of him wanting to make the world a safer place for other Grisha, of him wanting, like him believing that he is doing the right thing, I think is so fantastic, because it makes you not just see him as this like evil character. Like by the end of the entire series, when you realize that he doesn't have all the children there to murder in case Alina doesn't hold up her part of the deal, I loved that. I thought that yes, I still agree with that. I think that's one of the reasons why the Darkling is such a great villain, is that he's not just sort of like a mustache twirler. You know, he doesn't just want to cause bad things to happen and like be evil for evil's sake. Like he has a real goal and a mission, and he believes with his entire being that he is on the right side of history, that he is doing good. Even though it's like he's doing awful things to people, he believes that it's worth it for the greater good of his mission. And a lot of his beliefs aren't bad ones. Like a lot of what he wants for the Grisha is good, but it also comes from a place of like a lot of anger, definitely also from a lot of narcissism, and so I just find his character really, really fascinating, and just like such a good villain. Like what an amazing villain. I will say that like that children scene at like near the end of the trilogy, when he's like, I didn't actually kill all the children, I feel like a lot of people point to that as like the Darkling being a good guy. And like he still did horrible things, so he's not a good guy, but he's still emotionally and physically abusive to Alina. He's still, you know, murders people in horrific ways. He's not a good leader. So, you know, still not a great guy, but I like that he has, like, he's a real character. He's a real fleshed out villain and not just sort of like flat. I found the Darkling's character to be really heartbreaking, especially at the end of my copy of Ruin and Rising. I got a prequel to the Darkling story, and you kind of see that he's basically had to live his entire life growing up fearing other people, even his own kind, other Grisha, because there would either be people who wanted to kill him because of his power, because they're afraid of it, or because they want to use it for themselves. And to grow up like that, and to grow up with this very strong power, and also having to fear the entire world like that, is incredibly sad. And he had to have been an insanely lonely child who grew up to be an insanely lonely man. And so I have slightly different opinions on this, because I think like in a lot of ways that scene from the special edition of Ruin and Rising, it's like an additional extra scene at the end of the book of the Darkling and his mom when he's really little, and you kind of see, you know, you see exactly that. You see the pressures that he's under, and the fact that he, you know, is afraid of, basically he has to be afraid of everyone and he can't trust anyone. And I feel like in a lot of ways now when I read that scene, or I think about that scene, I kind of view it more as like a foil to Alina, who also grew up as a very lonely child and also came into a power that people wanted to take for their own or manipulate, and, you know, handled all of that very, very differently. So I kind of view that scene a little bit differently now, but I still really appreciate it, and I wish that it had just been in all of the editions, because it's a really good scene and moment. So if you've read the series and you haven't read that scene, I highly recommend trying to look it up. And I think you definitely see that in Alina, because she has that pity for him as a character, and she understands that. That's why I do love that he does have feelings for Alina, but I don't actually think they're feelings for Alina. Like, I think if Alina were any other person and still had the Sun Summoner powers, he would act and feel the same way, because I think that the Darkling isn't in love with Alina, he's in love with the idea of not having to be alone anymore, and that is all the more heartbreaking. So now on to my other favorite character, Nikolai. So yeah, every single scene with Nikolai was such a treat in both books. I thought his entrance in Ruin and Rising, where he rescued them while also complimenting himself, was just A+, fantastic. I want everything to be about Nikolai. I just want an entire book series about Nikolai. I also thought the idea, girl, you don't even know what you're gonna get in 5 years, of turning him into a monster in Ruin and Rising was brilliant. Like, taking this incredibly noble, beautiful, charming prince and making him this really grotesque creature was just heartbreaking. I will say, rereading it, I forgot, like I knew that was gonna happen, but I forgot how heartbreaking it is to like read about Nikolai, who is just like this glorious character and is sort of like the light throughout the series, be put in such a dark place. Oh, it is a lot to handle. It's very devastating. I kind of wish that we had gotten more of the after effects of that. Like, I mean, granted, I would want an entire book about Nikolai if I could have an entire book about Nikolai. But yeah, I think that's the one thing that I really wanted in Ruin and Rising, is at the end I just wanted more about him. Speaking of the end of Ruin and Rising, I don't know how I feel. I kind of feel like it was a little bit too clean. Like, I really liked the idea of Mal being the final amplifier, but, and this is gonna sound awful, I kind of wish he had just stayed dead. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. No. This is where I know, so like going into this reread, I remembered that I hated Mal. I like just wanted him to be cut from the books. I always said, like, if they ever adapt it, I hope they just get rid of Mal. And having reread the series, I just appreciate Mal's character so much more. Like, and I think part of it is because, you know, I read this 5 years ago. I was younger then, and I think I was a little bit more immature about like what I wanted in my love interests, and for me, Mal just wasn't exciting. You know, I wanted the brooding Kylo Ren kind of dude, you know? The thing is, like, in the series, you see Alina experience like all of these tragedies, but you don't see everything Mal goes through. You just sort of hear it referenced. But I remember in that first book, he talks about like how his best friends, other than Alina, like he basically watches them die because he went to try and rescue her, and all of these different ways that like Mal has just been ravaged by the world and still comes out of it fighting for Alina. And I feel like he is in a lot of ways her anchor to her humanity. I see a lot of people say that, like, I saw there's like one hot take that like Mal is emotionally abusive, and I just disagree with that. So like, it was like a pro Darkling take, and I was like, how can you be in favor of the Darkling and think Mal is emotionally abusive? I don't get it. For me, I think Mal is really important to Alina in that he helps ground her. He helps keep her from becoming the Darkling, from becoming evil. That's not what she wants. And I think this is the other thing back then, you know, and even before I started the book, is I had this vision of who Alina was and what I wanted for her. And what I wanted for her is I wanted her to be a Zoya. I wanted her to walk in there and own the place and, you know, go with the Darkling and be the evil queen, and wouldn't that be amazing? But that's not Alina. Like, Alina just wanted a family. She just wanted to, you know, have a peaceful life. It's like the book is about a Hufflepuff, but I wanted her to be a Slytherin, basically. And once I sort of accepted Alina for who she is and who she wanted to be and what she wanted out of life, I just came to appreciate Mal's character so much more. And especially just like everything Mal goes through. And I feel like the way that their story, you know, wraps up, and the circular nature of it, of both of them, you know, I think that their scene when they have sex for the first time is really beautifully done. I think their whole arc together is really beautifully done, and the way that it ends, like, I was just bawling on my reread because it was just so perfect. It was everything that they wanted, but it wasn't clean. There were a lot of really horrible losses and a lot that had to be dealt with after the series. Alina didn't want to be queen. She didn't want to be with Nikolai. She didn't want to be with the Darkling. Like, would I have chosen differently than Alina? Yes, 100%. However, like, this is Alina's story, and I think that like Leigh Bardugo does such a good job of like portraying that. And I love Mal because he's just an authentic portrayal of a young kid who is also like lost and sad and heartbroken and just trying to survive. And I think that Leigh does such a good job of like creating his character and his story arc, and you see him go through dark places, but you see him like pull out of that, and you see him continue to push through. And I think that that's really inspiring and really beautiful about their story. So I feel completely differently, obviously. And Mal being resurrected, like, I didn't understand how that happened, and until they had to like literally explain it to you, which I disagree. I totally got it upon the reread. It was like so obvious to me, even like leading up to it. I was like all of it just clicked so much better than it did upon the first read. I think I was just like, honestly, back then, like, probably skim reading. Like, I just wanted to know what happened. So like by the end I was like reading really fast, and so I wasn't like ingesting is that the word I want to use? I just wasn't like, you know, taking in the content as thoroughly as I could have been. But yeah, upon my second read, it all made all the sense in the world. I really liked the fact that getting all the amplifiers and going on this quest for this like insane amount of power just gets you not having any power. And I loved like the way that both of them felt sort of empty afterwards, or not empty, but like a part of them had gone. Like, I liked the fact that both of them had to deal with that loss together. Those have been my thoughts about the... Alright, so yeah, those are my thoughts 5 years ago on the Grisha trilogy. I feel like in a lot of ways my opinions are much the same. I still find the Darkling to be a really fascinating villain. I'm not as, you know, back then I was a total Darkling stan, Darkling and Nikolai, and I'm not anymore. Well, I'm still a Nikolai stan, but you know, I love the Darkling, but I still, when I reread it, I felt those feelings of like, hello, Darkling, every time he showed up on the page. But I think that's, you know, that's how you're supposed to feel. Like, Leigh Bardugo writes it in that way. Like, she wants you to feel swooned by this character so that you can understand how Alina is just constantly, you know, manipulated and gaslit by him. And so I loved that, and I loved Alina's character so much more in this reread. And definitely the thing that I disagreed with myself the most on is the ending. I love the ending now. I love Mal now. I totally disagree on my viewpoints on all of that back then. And I'm so excited for the adaptation because Archie, who plays Mal, just loves his character, I feel like, just as much as, I mean, anyone could. And I love to see like all of his tweets defending Mal. It just brings me a lot of hope to see like someone portraying this character that I love so much, love them just as much, because I feel like that's, you know, sometimes really rare with book adaptations. You know, oftentimes it's just sort of like, not that the actors don't love the character, but they, you know, it's like not the same, like it doesn't feel like they have the same respect or love for the source material in the original story, whereas like this cast, I really feel that love, and it makes me really hopeful and excited for what's to come. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Mal Oretsev. I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and like here's the thing, like I 100% think that, you know, people read differently and interpret things differently, and so, you know, if someone reads these books and they hate Mal and they love the Darkling and they ship Alina with the Darkling, that's fair. Like, that's a different reading than my reading. This is just sort of like my interpretation of the story and my feelings on it. And for me, I love Mal. I love Mal's character. And I am so excited to see him come alive on screen. So yeah, those are my updated thoughts on the Grisha trilogy. I am just, part of me wants to reread the entire series all over again because I just love it so much, and I just love these characters so much. It's definitely one of my like top favorite series of all time and means so much to me. And it's wild to like realize how far the series has come, like even watching that and seeing how much I just wanted like a Nikolai book, and now we have a Nikolai book and there's gonna be another one, and what an exciting time to be a Grisha fan. Anyways, I would love to know your guys' thoughts on anything I said in this video, or is there a book that you read years ago that you felt a certain way about that maybe you reread recently and realized that you don't feel that way? Because this has definitely sparked an interest in me to want to go back and look at some of the books that I said I didn't like or that I loved and see if I feel the same way now. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!